Friends is one of the most rewatched television shows in human history. People have watched every episode multiple times. They've paused scenes, analyzed dialogue, they've obsessed over details. And in doing all that rewatching and analyzing, they've discovered something. Friends has a lot of plot holes. There are inconsistencies that don't add up. There are continuity errors that make no sense. Are character details that contradict earlier storylines. And while some of these plot holes can be explained if you really try, others are just straight-up mistakes that the creators and producers left in the show. In this video, we're examining the biggest plot holes in Friends. We're looking at the apartment numbers that mysteriously change. We're exploring Chandler's alleged inability to cry that he somehow does. We're investigating Phoebe's mysterious relationship with the French language. We're analyzing character ages that don't match up. We're uncovering all the continuity errors and inconsistencies that make you go, wait, that doesn't make sense. And we're asking the question, are these plot holes intentional? Are they mistakes? Or can they actually be explained? Let's dive into the mysteries of Friends. Let's start with the most obvious and most talked about plot hole in Friends, the apartment numbers. When Friends started, Monica and Rachel's apartment was number 5, and Chandler and Joey's apartment was number 4. Those are the apartment numbers shown in the first few episodes. But then, a few episodes in, the apartment numbers change. Monica and Rachel's apartment becomes number 20, and Chandler and Joey's apartment becomes number 19. Is a massive continuity error because apartment 4 and 5 would suggest they live on the first floor of the building. But in establishing shots of the building, you can see that the apartments are clearly much higher up. And when characters look out the windows, the view suggests they're several stories up. So the creators made a mistake with the original apartment numbers, and then they changed them to 19 and 20 to match the visual reality of how high up the apartments appeared in the show. But here's the weird thing. No one in the show ever addresses this change. No one says, oh, they're moving apartments. No one explains why the numbers changed. Just a silent continuity correction that happens between episodes. Some fans have theories that the characters did move to different apartments. That's never mentioned in the show. The most likely explanation is that it was simply a production error that the creators corrected mid-series without acknowledging it. It's one of the most glaring inconsistencies in the show, and yet it's never discussed in the actual narrative. Now let's talk about Chandler and his alleged inability to cry. Throughout the series, there's a running joke that Chandler can't cry. Other characters make fun of him for this. It's presented as a character flaw or a personality trait. Chandler struggles to access his emotions, and one manifestation of that is that he can't cry. It's a funny running gag. But here's the problem. Chandler cries multiple times throughout the series. Very early in the show, there are scenes where Chandler is clearly crying or tearing up. In one famous episode, Ross is trying to decide who his best man is, and he gives both Joey and Chandler emotional speeches about how much they mean to him. And in that scene, Chandler is crying. He's tearing up. He's emotional. This contradicts the entire running joke about Chandler not being able to cry. So what's the explanation? Most likely explanation is that the writers didn't lock in Chandler's character trait of can't cry until later in the series. Early episodes, Chandler was still being developed as a character. The writers hadn't yet decided that this would be a defining trait of his personality. By the time the running joke became established, there were already episodes in the earlier seasons where Chandler had cried. Creators probably chose to ignore those earlier episodes and just establish the can't cry trait going forward. It's not a huge plot hole because it's easily explainable by saying the character trait was developed later, but it's definitely an inconsistency. Let's talk about Phoebe and the French language. In one episode, Monica introduces Phoebe to her sous chef. Phoebe doesn't know what a sous chef is. She has no idea what the term means. This is a completely normal reaction for someone who doesn't speak French. But later in the series, Phoebe teaches Joey French. She's fluent enough to teach him. She's speaking French. She knows the language. So how did she go from not knowing basic French culinary terminology to being fluent enough to teach the language? Most likely explanation is that Phoebe learned French between these two episodes. She decided to study the language, maybe because she was dating a French guy or something. The show never explains it, but it's not completely unreasonable to assume she picked it up. However, it does feel like a pretty significant life change that should have been mentioned if it happened. It's one of those things where the continuity isn't perfect, but it's also not a huge glaring error. Now let's look at character ages and timelines. Friends has significant character age inconsistencies. Monica and Rachel are supposed to be the same age because they met in high school. But then later, Monica reveals that she went to high school with Chandler, suggesting they're the same age too. But Chandler is supposed to be older than Ross, and Ross is supposed to be around the same age as Monica and Rachel. The timeline gets confusing when you try to map it out. Additionally, there are conflicting references to characters' birthdays and ages throughout the series. Sometimes a character's age is mentioned in one episode and contradicts an age mentioned in another episode. Reality is that as the show went on for 10 seasons, the writers probably didn't keep careful track of exact ages and timelines, knew roughly how old the characters were, but they didn't maintain perfect continuity across all 10 seasons. Testament to how long the show ran. 10 years is a long time to maintain perfect continuity, especially in the 1990s and 2000s, when shows didn't have dedicated continuity departments the way they do now. Let's discuss Rachel's girl-kissing storyline. In Season 7, a girl named Melissa comes to visit Rachel. Rachel mentions that she and Melissa kissed once in college. But in Season 4, Rachel had specifically said that she kissed a girl as part of a game with Monica to win their apartment back from Joey and Chandler. So Rachel had already kissed a girl. Then in Season 7, when Phoebe refuses to believe Rachel is capable of kissing a girl, feels like the show is forgetting that Rachel already kissed a girl. This is a continuity error where the show presents information as if it's new, when it was actually already established in an earlier episode. The explanation is probably that the writers simply forgot about the earlier kiss. It was a minor plot point from 4 seasons earlier, and when they wrote the Season 7 episode, didn't remember that Rachel had already kissed a girl. So they wrote it as if this was the first time anyone was suggesting Rachel was capable kissing a girl. It's a continuity error, but it's understandable given how many episodes the show had. Let's talk about Chandler's New Year's Eve kiss with Monica. According to the show's timeline, Chandler and Monica first kissed at New Year's Eve at the very end of Season 4 and the beginning of Season 5, is a major moment in the show. It's the beginning of one of the show's most important relationships. But then later in the series are flashback episodes and references that seem to contradict exactly when and how they got together. The show seems to change the details of their first kiss multiple times. Was it really New Year's Eve? When exactly did they decide to become a couple? The timeline gets murky. This is another example of the show not maintaining perfect continuity over its 10-season run. Writers established Chandler and Monica's relationship as a major turning point in the story, but then they didn't always stay consistent with the exact details of how it happened. It's a plot hole that doesn't ruin the storyline but does cause some confusion if you're paying close attention. Let's examine Monica's apartment and whether she owns or rents. Throughout the series, Monica lives in an apartment on the West Village. It's a beautiful, huge apartment with high ceilings and a fantastic view. For much of the series, the show implies that Monica is renting this apartment. But Monica's a chef. She doesn't make that much money, especially early in the series. How is she affording this massive, beautiful apartment in the West Village? The rent would be astronomical. This is one of the biggest plot holes in Friends, because it just doesn't make financial sense. The show never adequately explains how Monica can afford this apartment. There's a vague explanation that maybe Monica inherited something, or maybe her parents helped, but it's never clearly stated. Later in the series, it's revealed that Monica's apartment might have belonged to her grandmother, or maybe was originally her parents' apartment. But the details are fuzzy. The reality is that Monica's apartment is way too nice for her income level, and the show doesn't adequately explain how she can afford it. This is a plot hole that reveals the gap between the fantasy world of the show and real financial reality. Let's talk about Joey's career and his knowledge inconsistencies. Joey is supposed to be an actor, but he's also portrayed as not very intelligent. The show makes jokes about Joey not knowing things. But then sometimes Joey shows knowledge about random topics that he shouldn't know. For example, Joey hides a copy of Stephen King's The Shining in the freezer because he's at a scary part of the book. Then he describes the plot to Rachel, but he describes the movie plot, not the book plot. This suggests Joey read the book but then confused it with the movie. But would Joey, as portrayed on the show, even read Stephen King? It's a minor continuity issue, but it shows the show sometimes forgets what Joey's character is supposed to be. There are other Joey inconsistencies throughout the series. Sometimes he's portrayed as completely clueless, and sometimes he knows surprisingly specific information. Writers probably adjusted Joey's intelligence level depending on what the joke needed. If a scene needed Joey to not understand something, he was an idiot. If a scene needed him to contribute something, he was smarter. It's character inconsistency rather than a traditional plot hole, but it's definitely noticeable if you're paying attention. Let's look at the rotating cast of relatives. Monica's family situation changes throughout the series. She has an older brother, Ross. She has a father and mother, but there are some inconsistencies with extended family members. Characters appear and disappear. Cousins are mentioned once and never again. Family events are described differently in different episodes. This is somewhat understandable because the show had 10 seasons and couldn't possibly develop every family relationship. It does create the impression that the show doesn't have a fully thought-out family structure. Similarly, Phoebe's family situation is intentionally mysterious and inconsistent Because Phoebe is portrayed as having a chaotic upbringing, but even accounting for that, some of the details about Phoebe's past contradict each other. Was she homeless? How many times? Who was her mother? Show makes Phoebe's background deliberately vague and changes details when it's convenient for a joke. It's not exactly a plot hole because it's sort of intentional, but it does mean Phoebe's backstory has more inconsistencies than any other character. Let's talk about Thanksgiving. Friends is famous for its Thanksgiving episodes. There are several continuity issues with Thanksgiving throughout the series. In one episode, it's established that the group always goes to Monica's apartment for Thanksgiving. But then there are episodes where the location changes. Are also inconsistencies with who's dating who during Thanksgiving, who's spending the holiday where, and who's involved in the various Thanksgiving dramas. Some of these inconsistencies are minor, but they do exist for anyone paying close attention. One major Thanksgiving inconsistency involves the Geller Cup, which is a football trophy that Monica and Ross used to compete for during high school Thanksgiving games. But the show makes references to this trophy that contradict how it was established. Was there one game? Multiple games? When did this tradition start? The details are fuzzy, and the show doesn't maintain perfect consistency about the Geller Cup storyline even though it's referenced multiple times. Let's examine Rachel's career trajectory. Rachel starts the series as a runaway bride with no job experience. She works at Central Perk as a waitress. She gets into fashion. By the end of the series, she's a successful woman in her 30s with a serious career. But the show doesn't always maintain consistency about exactly what Rachel's job is or how much money she makes. There are episodes where Rachel is broke and struggling, and then immediately after, she's doing fine financially. There are inconsistencies about how much money she makes at different jobs. It's not a major plot hole, but it's a continuity issue with Rachel's career trajectory. Let's talk about character deaths and status. Show kills off some characters and mentions others' deaths, but there are inconsistencies about who's dead and when they died. James Michael Tyler, who played Gunther, appears in many episodes, but there's confusion about whether Gunther knows how many people he's served or understands the concept of a customer base. These are minor inconsistencies, but they exist. Now let's look at the Central Perk itself. Show is partially set at Central Perk, the coffee shop. But there are continuity issues about who works there, what hours it's open, and how it's laid out. In some episodes, it's clear that Gunther owns the place. In other episodes, the ownership is less clear. The layout of the coffee shop changes slightly throughout the series for production reasons, which sometimes creates continuity issues about where doors are and how the space is organized. Let's examine the Ross and Rachel relationship timeline. Ross's feelings for Rachel are established in the pilot episode, but there are inconsistencies about exactly when he told her, when she found out, and when they got together. Show has multiple scenes that could be considered their first kiss, but the writers seem to change which one is canonical depending on the episode. Was it the kiss in Season 2? Was there an earlier kiss? Later in the series, there are flashbacks that seem to establish different versions of events than what was shown in the original episodes. Let's talk about Monica and Chandler's wedding. It's a major event in the series, a two-part episode that culminates in their wedding. There are continuity issues about the wedding itself. Details about who was invited, who was where during the ceremony, and what exactly happened differ between the original wedding episode and later references to the wedding. This is another case where the show doesn't maintain perfect continuity about one of its biggest events. Let's look at the show's casual racism, homophobia, and other problematic elements. While not exactly plot holes in the traditional sense, there are episodes that make jokes that contradict the show's established values. For example, the show is generally progressive about LGBTQ issues because Chandler's father is transgender, and the show is ultimately respectful about that. But then there are other episodes with homophobic jokes that feel out of place. This is more about inconsistent values than plot holes, but it does feel like the show sometimes contradicts itself about what it believes. Let's examine the babies in the show. Monica and Chandler struggle to have biological children, so they adopt. But the timeline of their adoption is sometimes unclear. When exactly did they adopt? How old is their adopted daughter? There are also inconsistencies about other characters' babies. Emma, Ross's daughter with Rachel, should be a certain age in later episodes, but sometimes the show treats her as younger or older than she should be. This is probably because child actors age in real time, so the show had to adjust the character's age. Let's talk about the show's final season and the series finale. There are significant continuity issues in how the final season sets up the ending. Rachel gets a job offer in Paris, which comes completely out of nowhere. This job opportunity is not set up properly in earlier episodes. Then the finale involves multiple characters potentially leaving New York, contradicts the tone of earlier seasons where the show emphasized the group's closeness and the idea that they would always be together. Finale creates plot holes by introducing new conflict that doesn't feel earned by earlier episodes. Here's the truth about plot holes in Friends. Some of them are intentional choices by the creators. Some of them are continuity errors that resulted from making a show over 10 years. Some of them are things that can be explained if you're generous in your interpretation. And some of them are just plain mistakes. Apartment number change was a production error that was silently corrected. Chandler crying contradicts his character trait because the trait was established later. Phoebe's French language situation could be explained by her learning it off-screen. Character age inconsistencies are probably just the result of not keeping perfect track over 10 seasons. What's important to understand is that Friends is still a brilliant show despite these plot holes. Plot holes don't ruin the show because the show's strength is in its characters and its humor, not in its perfect continuity. The show made millions of people laugh. It created iconic characters. It created unforgettable moments. Fact that some details don't perfectly line up doesn't change any of that. But it's also fun to notice these inconsistencies because it shows that even the biggest, most successful TV show in the world is not perfect. Even a show that has been rewatched millions of times has things that don't add up. Subscribe to CelebTruth for more deep dives into TV shows, more analysis of plot holes, and more explorations of the stories we love. In our next video, we're ranking all 236 episodes of our Friends from worst to best, and the debate is going to be absolutely intense. Thanks for watching CelebTruth. Drop a comment below and let us know which plot hole shocked you the most. Did you notice the apartment number change? Catch Chandler crying despite the can't cry running gag? Did you notice Phoebe's French language inconsistency? Plot hole do you think is the biggest in Friends? Let's discuss. Like this video if you enjoyed this analysis. Subscribe for more TV and celebrity deep dives. And turn on notifications so you never miss a CelebTruth video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.